So, I recorded a video yesterday that self-destructed. Um, it was like a 25-minute monologue about things I've been thinking about. And I thought it was pretty freaking good. It flowed. It brought me out of a bad mood. And then I hit finish recording on photo booth and bah! It's just great. Pardon my voice, I'm a little bit sick. But I wanted to recap that, and hopefully this doesn't self-destruct again. So essentially it was about perspectives on being stuck and being in a rut, because I am currently getting out of a rut and dealing with sort of negative emotions and sort of familiar patterns that you used to struggle with, and now, through this process of becoming more aware of your insides and outsides and whatever you want to call it, spiritual awakening or whatever, you're like, oh, I know better. I understand why this is, but it almost makes it more frustrating because you're still doing it. You're still doing the thing that you shouldn't be doing, and now you really know why you shouldn't be doing it, and you're very aware of that you're doing it. And it almost makes it feel like you have even less power than you did before, which can be frustrating. And just to recap, there was this period of time where I mean during university, well, I'm still at university, during undergrad, my experience with depression and anxiety was what it was. I intuitively I wanted to qualify that it wasn't that bad, but it felt pretty shit. But anyways, like, the point was that at that time, identified with thoughts, identified with experiences, right? Not having this idea of what I actually am, if you will, or like what the nature of my mind actually is. So I was identified as the thinker, confronted with all these emotions and negative thoughts and so on. And it became part of my story that I am depressed, right? I am depressed. I'm qualifying my being as depressed. It is this way and not another way. And this is what gets people, including myself, this is just belief structures in general, right? Like, this is how you continuously manifest your own reality, is by perpetuating these beliefs, these limiting beliefs that are fundamentally untrue, right? Like, it's true, you're going through a pattern, I was going through a pattern of time, with certain emotions, certain thoughts, certain feelings, certain behaviors I acted out, right? Like, my pattern recognition is like, oh, this is depression, therefore I must be depressed, right? Anyways, moving on then, after a pretty big breakup, and it's all kind of linked in with this whole process for me personally. After then, because there's a lot of processing going on, a lot of things. I can't really explain what it was, but I now experienced myself going through the same thing, but in a very different way. I could see myself feeling those same feelings, thinking similar thoughts. Excuse me. But not identifying as depressed. I was like, oh, depression is kind of happening right now. That was kind of the flavor of how it was. So that was a very confusing time, because people would ask me, especially coming out of the breakup and so on, like, how are you doing? Whatever. I didn't know how to answer. It was this very bizarre thing where within me I was holding both sort of this peace and blissful joy that I've never experienced in my life, but at the same time I was like, well, I'm no longer just my experiences. My experiences are very nice, but like, because I know I'm not just my experiences, I just I could tap into this peace and joy and just okayness with whatever was happening, which was really profound, very confusing. But yeah, fast forward at that time, with non-attachment and all this stuff, I was like, I'm just gonna enjoy this and learn whatever I'm learning from it. But of course, the fantasies, your mind kind of goes wandering. It's like, oh, life's gonna be so easy from now on. And in some respects, that's absolutely true. But yeah, the process keeps on going, and there are layers to these problems, right? It's not like it's not like you experience it once in a better way and all of a sudden it's gone. It's like an onion. You got to slowly peel away at these things, and every time you struggle in a slightly new way, and then you learn something slightly new, different, gives you slightly new perspective, and over time, if you can trust that process, not hold on, and not identify with experiences, right? Because if you identify as like, I am depression, I am depressed, then you're gonna hold on to that identity, right? And there's a lot more inertia if you're holding on to it as a part of you, as opposed to just knowing that you are you prior to any experience, right? Like you are awareness prior to any experience, and no experience, whether it's depression or anxiety, can ever do anything to you, right? And you can embrace those emotions as like a direct manifestation of who you are, and whatever thing you're struggling with, right? Because it's a perfect reflection of your internals. So yeah, if you can do that, you can go through these cycles and appreciate those cycles with confidence, or almost like a level of gratitude. Now, that's all true, right? And your thinking mind can like remind yourself of that. You can't expect yourself to just effortlessly be in this blissful place all the time, right? But over time, your thinking mind becomes better at kind of snapping yourself out of being identified with thoughts. And this is not to like, it becomes toxic if you're dissociating from, or like shunning or disapproving or essentially tucking away those experiences, right? You shouldn't use this, I imagine that's a kind of spiritual bypassing, where you're like, oh, I'm not depressed, actually, therefore this depressive thought is invalid. Go away. go somewhere else where I don't see you anymore. But we all know that doesn't work. So yeah, it's subtle, right? You gotta snap yourself out of it, but without rejection, right? You gotta snap yourself out of it and feel the shit more than you were feeling it before. But again, it's like the flavor's kind of different, right? You can feel it knowing that this is valuable, right? Not some external emotion or some external force that you need to fix or whatever. It's all perfect. It's all exactly as it should be, even if it doesn't feel nice. And yeah, I think the reframing of the pain, of the discomfort, is super, super powerful, right? It's almost everything, right? Because you can imagine experiencing the same pain in a gym versus just randomly on the streets. Let's say you're doing the most epic set of your life in the gym. You're hitting a PR, whatever, and you're just amazed because first of all you're expecting the pain. Second of all, the pain means something great. Third of all, you feel like you have a sense of control, like you chose this for yourself, right? If you had exactly the same pain, let's say your legs, right? But you're not in the gym, you don't expect this, it just all of a sudden happens inconveniently when you're on the streets, you're gonna think you're fucking dying, right? You're gonna be like, what? Ah! And you're gonna resist it, and you're not gonna like it, and you're gonna really suffer, right? Like the pain is gonna feel so much worse. But it's the same pain. So it's really about how much resistance you put up to these things. So that was number one. However, it's still been really frustrating because with these spiritual ideas now since start of January, I've just been in this. I'm like, I have a vision. I know where this could go, right? But there's a big difference between taking in content about these esoteric spiritual ideas and being like, yes, I understand. This is great. This makes perfect sense. I can even explain it to other people. But once, ooh, the sun is very shiny right now. Can you? No, that's totally blown out. Anyways, yeah, I'm just kind of stuck in frustration, still feeling sorry for myself, not doing the things that I need to do. I mean, for me personally, it's, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, but like, it's this perpetuating cycle of not meeting my physical needs. You know, I mean, thankfully, I'm physically safe, but I'm very much neglecting my food, so my diet, my hydration, and my sleep. Sleep being the biggest issue. Because when I don't sleep well, I don't have much energy, I'm not motivated. It's much harder for me to sort of be my best self, which makes me do less of the things that I do to feel good or do naturally that make me feel good. And then I'm just like, I'm tired and I'm too tired to do anything about it. Which is funny, right? Because you think if you're tired, you'd want to sleep, but for some reason, I don't want to sleep. And that's something I'm definitely trying to figure out. So if any of you have ideas of why, I don't know if it's an ADHD thing, or if it's a trauma thing, or if it's just a certain belief that's been like stuck in my mind, where I feel like sleep is a waste of my time. And that goes to show how like mind dominated I am. Where this is my thoughts are, you know, I just crave stimulation all the time, and to that kind of brain, and again that kind of brain, that's most brains, the idea of shutting down, actually I don't know if that's most brains, I don't know, but the idea of shutting down is terrifying. Well, it's like the last thing I want to do, because now there's no stimulation. What's gonna happen in here? And then, you know, most of the time when I actually do end up laying down in bed and just think and kind of meditate and whatever, it is nice. But it's fucking confusing because I'm often, it's like I'm physically tired, but my mind is just not tired. But anyways, I'm just rambling about specifics about my life now. But the point I'm trying to make is all these cycles, way of like living more connected to the physical world, that's all super important, and connected. So I know sort of getting a sleep cycle down and getting some movement and getting some fucking sunlight and then eating properly, like these things, it's like a positive feedback loop, right? It's not, it feels like a million things you gotta juggle, but it kind of comes together. Now, the thing that I actually wanted to talk about was how to care for yourself, right? A means of practicing self-love. And the reason this is significant to me personally, and maybe useful to anyone else listening, is this weird discongruence between how we like to treat other people versus how we end up treating ourselves, right? Because for the people I love and care about, and even for a stranger, if there's sort of an opportunity to make them feel good, that's what I'm here for, right? Like I like to make people feel good, and it's always confused me because I'm like, I like myself. I was like, I don't hate myself, right? I understand that's subtle, and like sort of affects you on different levels. But yeah, I recognized that for the most part, my thoughts like themselves. My thoughts like most of what's going on here, or I'm at least sort of compassionate to the things that I struggle with, and whatever. But yeah, it's this part. It's this idea that sort of the lack of care for those aspects of me, I think comes from this the strong identification with thoughts, because as identified as a thinker, I almost perceive emotions and intuitions and feelings as, they're happening internally to me, right? They're my private experiences, but they're still coming sort of like my thoughts, I am being approached by those experiences, right? They are sort of external. They're internal, but they're external to what I feel like I am, right? And as such, they are often inconvenience. They often inconvenience what my thoughts think I want, right? Or, it's like my stomach. Right now, I'm hungry. I'm like, well, I want to record this video, and then I want to do this, right? And it's like, it's so subtly but subconsciously just interpreted as an inconvenience, as opposed to a part of me that's communicating with me, right? Like, that feeling of hunger is just as much me as this thought is that I'm expressing right now. But that doesn't come intuitive, right? Same with all sorts of emotions and moods and whatever. You're like, oh, why am I dealing with this now? Right? But like, what's this I that's separate from what's being dealt with, right? First of all, it's all internal. But it's just thoughts that have made themselves the master of the system, thinking that it's cool and everything else is sort of an inconvenience or an opportunity for it to get something. Or, if it is an inconvenience, it tries to like, meh, for later. And that's not a healthy relationship, right? When you consider that, especially these primal, like physical needs that are communicated with you through hunger and thirst and fear, like these like deep and tiredness, right? Exhaustion. Fighting against them, which I do all the time, it is just a total disservice to, I don't know if you want to call it your little inner monkey or inner child or inner teenager, like whatever it is. It's not separate from you. Like, this is part of your psychology, part of your unconscious, right? And you can try to make these things more conscious over time. But like, that's just as much you as what you think you are, or what I think I am, right? And denying and resisting those things is like having a child that you're just shooing away when they're like coming to you and being like, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm thirsty, I don't feel safe, And but my perspective, sort of the way I feel like, the way I've always thought, or subconsciously thought about it, is that those signals are not my son or my child or someone or a part of me that I'm responsible for, but as these mechanical signals coming from this biological wet machine, essentially, right? And they're inconvenient to what actually matters, which are my thoughts. And that's so disconnected from reality, and that's so fucking sad, right? It's really sad that I've neglected those parts of me for so long and still struggle to. It's so fucking funny, sort of taking a step back, and I'm like cleaning my kitchen and shit. Be like, oh, I just have a thought that I'd rather sit on the sofa right now because I'm tired, or I'm hot, or some shit. And yeah, I really want to just train it to my own mind, because I think it's so valuable and true and whatever. that hold up, you know, get a grip. It's like, I've got compassion for my thoughts, right? It didn't choose to be disrespectful or choose to neglect parts of its greater being. But yeah, it's like, yeah, get a grip, take care of yourself, love yourself, right? Realize that there are parts of you that deserve love that have not been getting love. Not because you didn't want to give them love, but because you didn't know that they are things that sort of deserved love. Yeah, however you want to look at it, I think I think part of what I'm trying to say, and okay, this will make the video just a cut. Okay, next chapter, next sort of thing I want to talk about, but it kind of relates to it, is how to start communicating with these aspects of you effectively as a thinker, right? While we can intellectually and maybe experientially have moments where we recognize that you're not just your thoughts, but to the limit, there's no separation. Everything is you. Sort of what the world looks like is the image of your subconscious from a given perspective. But yeah, like I was saying, while you can slowly shift your intuitive perspective on how you see the world, what's very, very useful to us, and the reason for this being that, well, rather not the reason, but what's important to recognize is that we see a conceptual world, right? Like that's what our thoughts see. We see things everywhere, right? There's things fucking everywhere. Like things, and things have functions. You can move them. Our psychology is so deeply ingrained to recognize function and recognize thingness, and this might be kind of a weird concept, but maybe something that's a bit more intuitive is language, words, right? You're not really hearing the sounds I'm saying right now. You're hearing meaning. You're hearing concepts. You're hearing the conceptual map that you've placed on top of raw experience. The same way, vision, or your visual field, is nothing more than a 2D landscape of colors, shapes, and whatever. You don't really see sight, right? What you're really seeing is the conceptual map of things and function and meaning and associations and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, that's all happens subconsciously, but the point I'm trying to make is that concepts are useful, but they're not reality, right? We think reality is a certain way because we tell all these narratives and these stories about it, which includes, by the way, our ego, which again is not any certain way. It's just this nebulous agglomeration of thoughts and emotions and memories and other things you identify with, right? But there's no thing, there's no solidness to it, nothing that actually has attributes besides the beliefs that we attribute to it. And as a result, so again, all of that to say that reality prior to thought is not conceptual, right? It is what it is. However, concepts and narratives are extremely useful to point at truths, right? Even though reality is not conceptual, we can start understanding it conceptually by telling different stories about it, by looking at it from different angles and being like, oh, if you look at it this way, it can be this way, blah, 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 and so on. And the same way we communicate with other egos through narrative, through language, we personify. We're like, okay, if you agree to this character, I will agree to your character, and we personify what's happening through concepts and through narratives, right? And it works. But what also works is personifying other aspects of reality, right? And once you do that with a certain, first of all, you got to believe it to see it, right? It's not the way science normally approaches it, where you kind of need to expect to see something to believe it, right? Once you realize that the world is foundationally made of consciousness and experiences and is understood through narratives, your beliefs construct those narratives, and those beliefs continually manifest your lived experience. So if you, with belief, intention, and attention, can personify certain aspects, and this is what people do during prayer, right? They personify this ineffable everythingness, or a specific aspect of this ineffable everythingness, as God, and they communicate with it, or their higher self, or some guides, or whatever it is, right? There's all sorts of non-conceptual meaning out there that is not separate from you, but because you operate on narratives, the rest can also operate on narratives, right? And if you recognize its existence as not separate from you, and go in with the intention of communicating with it through these means, right, for this intention, by giving it that attention that it deserves, it will respond. It does. And I don't think this is a woo-woo, spooky thing. At least from my metaphysics, this makes sense now. Check out my metaphysics video. But yeah, you can do this, and this is, typically called prayer if it's about the greater universe or your higher self or whatever. But yeah, this is goes to show how fucking far gone I am as a hard-headed material scientist. Yeah, I pray now, right? But I wouldn't if it didn't make sense to me. And again, all of this to say that you cannot just do that about the higher aspects of you, but it's very useful to also do this with the lower aspects, right? Like your inner child. It's not something that you can normally talk to. It doesn't speak like you do. It sends signals, right? These like primal, biological, physical needs that are being communicated. And if you, again, with your beliefs and your attention and intention, try to understand this inner aspect of reality that doesn't speak, it's a fucking infant, let's say, right? And again, with that perspective, with that way of personifying this aspect of you, I think you can get in tune with it in a very powerful way, right? You see it as family, not as sort of, or even as yourself, right? But not as sort of this external thing that's inconvenient to your thoughts and whatever. And in a similar way, right? Like you can think the world is so unfair and everything is against you and, whatever. That's also your mind not realizing that it is not separate from everything else. And casting judgment, right? Casting judgment on yourself. Ultimately, all judgment is self-judgment. And once we realize that, in one way or another, everything is us, and we are everything, we can start approaching the wider world with the kind of compassion and the kind of gratitude that is natural to us. And the crazy thing is, the world responds. The world fucking loves that. The world is just waiting for your thinking mind to wake up and recognize that it is not the master of this system, that you're not separate from everything else, and that all the fucking challenges that you face and shit times that you're having have a purpose. Like, literally. Literally. Whether it's inevitable or chosen or whatever it is, right? I don't want to place an exact story on it, but however it works, the challenges you face good, all of it. Your whole life is a perfect mirror to who you are and what you should become, in a sense, right? Who knows how much control we have in that process? But what I found is by letting go of control, at least your mind surrendering the kind of control it thinks it has, right? That surrender of control gives you control in the sense that you can now freely express your will of your whole system, not just of what this little part of the system thinks it wants. so yeah. And by really embracing those aspects of you and tuning into your intuition, it's a powerful way in which you can start collaborating and entering in this like co-creation process with the rest of the world. And that's fucking beautiful. So anyways, if anyone has any questions, please, you know what to do. Lots of love. Bye.